is mission critical. You got to get it done. And then you know that there's an equal party that's trying to do the same thing. You know, how do you look at them? Is it a competitor? Do you have to get the task done before they do? You know, I mean, we could even be talking about a competition, or in some cases, a game, right? A pickup basketball game, you know, and the opposing team is who's also trying to get the objective of winning the game down at the same time you are. So, is it net zero? You know, only one person can win, right? If it's a competition like that. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about camaraderie versus opposition, right? Does it have to be that your opposition is considered your opposition? Is that the best way to frame having fuel for competitive drive? Because if you're trying to succeed, should you look at the enemy as the opposition? Or is there another way to look at the enemy, you know, that would help with competitive drive? Or maybe that is the best way. So I don't know. But let's spend some time talking about it. So what actually pushes people to and through their limits? You know, if there's a barrier that they know they have to break, if it's at a competition or something internally, externally, you know, what pushes them through there, right? Is it the enemy across from you? Is it the person that you know that if you outperform, then that's a good gauge on success? You know, if you do better than they do, then you'll do better, right? And you're succeeding, you're doing well, you know. Or is it the teammate? Is it the same individual you look at as a teammate, or an actual teammate in terms of drive and to help you push and to move and get you to the next level? Well, in sports, business, fitness, life in general, I think we're consistently told to overwork the competition, right? Outwork the competition, beat the competition. You got to do better than them. Same time, you hear about the power of brotherhood, teamwork, sharing the struggle. And this is at a competitive market as well. If you look at the person that's across from you that you may consider to be the opposition, it might be better to view that individual as the one that's your partner in the dance, is what I like to say. So it really depends which one you think drives yourself better, opposition or camaraderie. I don't know. Which one is it? So, more importantly, which one creates long term success instead of burnout? You know, because really consistency and sticking to your guns, that's going to be how you have a level of success. So, let's break it down. So, let's talk about the case for opposition, right? The person standing across from you, is that a powerful tool to win? And the answer is yes, of course. You know, that's what I mean. A lot of bodybuilding, fitness competitions, you know, the things that I happen to be into, that's how people find success. Is they just want to try so hard to beat the person that's across from them, right? And that is the number one drive. It helps with adrenaline, with focus, urgency, with ego. Take that as what it is, and a desire to win now, right? If there's somebody to beat, there's something to prove, there's a rival staring back at you, of course, your effort is going to spike, you know? And some examples of this would be two athletes chasing the same scholarship when you know there can only be one, two businessmen that are competing for the same market, you know? So two lifters fighting for the same podium, or bodybuilders fighting for the same podium as well, right? That opposition sharpens performance, but in the short term, okay? And we'll spend some more talking about it. But in terms of the problem, opposition driven motivation often relies on external validation, right? You look at external forces and external validation. You don't know what that individual has done to prepare. You don't know what they're going through personally, but you're gauging your success based on how you fare against that individual, which can be a dangerous, slippery slope game to play. It'll work as long as there's somebody chasing me, right? It'll work as long as I'm angry enough to do better than the person that's across from me, and I need someone on that other side. Some competitions you don't have competition, right? You're kind of up against yourself, you know. So what happens when the enemy disappears? What happens when you don't have that competition and that opposition? Well, the fire can douse a bit. So that's what you have to be careful. Even worse, consistent opposition, you know, if you look at it, it raises a stress hormone, right? Because you're constantly trying to outdo something that you have very little control over. It encourages comparison. You pretty consistently compare yourself to somebody that has a whole different ball game, a whole different history, and create some resentment, and often lead to burnout or isolation too, you know, because you can get down on yourself. Opposition is kind of like jet fuel. It's explosive, right? It'll get you moving in the right direction, but unsustainable. And you also want to look at the workplace, and is camaraderie better? Because you may consider that person your opposition to get you moving and motivated, but do they consider you that way? So you also take a look at that, because it has to do with possibly alienating a relationship, a friendship. So let's talk more about camaraderie. We'll see the flip side of the coin. So camaraderie works a little bit different. Instead of saying, "Hey, I have to beat you," it's more, "I don't want to let you down." You're my partner in the dance. You realize that both of you have a common goal. And if anything, let's help each other get there. When people feel camaraderie, they feel supported, they feel accountable, there's value, they feel connected, even if it's with their enemy. They feel connected. They show up even when motivation is low. And there's consistency, resilience, that is all a part of camaraderie, right? You always consider those two things to be a strong part. And it's long term effort. It has more to do with the end game after a while. And you realize that, if you may not win that battle, right? You may not win that particular day, but emotional regulation under pressure comes because you don't feel that you have to go so hard to where you overcome that individual as an enemy, right? It's more, there's more compassion involved, right? So when you think military units, elite teams, that work together, training partners, has been through it all, and say that they also still compete against each other, there's a level of conjoindness and synergy that happens there, even amongst those that are competing against each other. They don't push harder because they hate the opponent. That's not what it's about. They push harder because there's somebody that they respect that's counting on them. Again, even if that's the opponent. It's a weird thought process to have, but a good analogy that I always think of is when I watch UFC or any MMA fighting, and these guys are beating the mess out of each other, right? They're bloodied. I mean, they're just going to town, right? And at the end of the round, they hug, they fist bump, and then they go to their corners. And then at the end of the fight, they hug. In some cases, one picks them up, the other one up on the shoulders. They just try to kill each other, right? But there is such a big difference there and such value there, because it motivates through having that purpose and having an understanding of each other, whereas opposition motivates through fear of losing. They know their common goal, and they know at the end of the day, they do want to defeat each other, but then they both have a level of understanding with each other as well. So, and they are helping each other get better. At the end of the day, the harder that one tries, they know it's helping the other one. So it's a bit of a vortex. So when you look at opposition, it spikes effort, but then the other sustains it. So you have opposition, but then, when you have a level of camaraderie and respect for your opponent, it has more of a sustainable impact. Okay, let's talk about which one that you think might be better. So a good way to look at it, a good analogy here would be opposition is a spark, right? It's a spark. If you consistently go after, your opposition as the bad guy, right? You're interested more in them in some cases, than yourself, right? You don't see it from within, but it's considered a spark, So you have a drive towards defeating that individual, whereas camaraderie is more of a furnace. It builds more of a long-term effect on you because you're looking from within. You're trying to enhance yourself, right? Opposition can ignite performance, right? You get one good drive of performance, create intensity. So you get a strong drive for intensity and elevate short term output. There's a lot of ego when it comes to the opposition, but camaraderie builds discipline, it creates identity, right? Again, you look from within and within yourself. It keeps people showing up when the thing that getting, it gets tough and it's very difficult, produces growth that lasts. Also, if you look at it again, opposition, right, versus camaraderie. If you look at camaraderie as, hey, my opponent is not my enemy, but he is my friend. He or she is my friend, that makes a big difference, because in the long run, you have a level of humility where you are willing to learn new things. You're willing to learn from your enemy. Learn from your enemy. Again, I know I keep going to the MMA stuff, but I've seen it where, opponents that have one has beaten the other later go and join their training camp because they know that whatever they had is what helped them defeat them. So they want to get better. And they have that level of camaraderie, even for their opponent, even for the person that they had the extreme opposition, right? So that level of humility does make a difference, right? The most successful competitors don't choose one or the other. You have a little bit of both. They train in camaraderie and they compete with opposition. You have a combination of both for a level of success, right? You build yourself in a supportive environments, again, in that same environment to where you know that there's a level of competition, but then there's a level of conjointness with them as well. So that's how champions last, and that's how champions build a continued efforts towards improvement, right? You unleash that preparation against your rivals, and again, your rivals can become your friends because you're going to learn more and more from them. Okay, so let's talk about some practical takeaways from this. So you think of locus of control, and if you haven't heard of locus of control, there's internal and external locus of control. There's a couple studies that were behind it. Internal locus of control has to do with what comes from within. So the things that you can control of your own thought process and your influence, it comes from within. External locus of control has to do with things on the outside that you do not have as much influence. If you have an opponent, that you're competing against, or a coworker that you there's a promotion both of you are gunning for, whatever it may be, an external locus of control is worrying what that competitor or what that coworker may be doing. You have zero influence on what they do, right? They choose their own steps just like you do. It can lead to a lot of stress and a lot of difficulties, as opposed to internal locus of control. Internal locus of control is you're thinking more about yourself and what influence you have on your own, and you're not bothering to worry or think about those areas of performance or those areas that don't have influence on what you can actually grab and control. So it makes a huge difference on your performance. And people that are successful, again, several studies out there show that successful people that have a lower level of stress typically focus on internal locus of control. So you always want to consider that, always whatever you can control within yourself. Okay. So a few things you want to ask yourself as well. Okay. Are you relying on only anger or your rivalry to stay motivated? Right. That rivalry and what they're doing, is that your number one concern? And that's what keeps you motivated? Or are you building a circle that holds you accountable even if you don't feel like showing up? Right. Again, internal locus of control, what you can do. You can control the environment that you're in, and you can influence and get with others that can help you with continued success. If you're burned out, you might be thinking about everything from that opposition that, again, that you can't control what they may or may not be doing. You can find yourself in a bit of a spiral there. So, but if you stay consistent, grounded, and progressing, you can build a camaraderie into your process and partnering with those, including your opponent, where you can have a continued success. Okay. So competition can push you forward when you look at just going in a positive direction, but connection keeps you standing. You have a good connection with your opponent and with other individuals that can continue to push you and drive you and lead to levels of success. You want to build with people, you want to train with purpose, and then step into competition prepared, but not desperate and not chasing your tail, right? That's real drive. And when it comes to competing in any aspects of life or just being prepared in any aspects of life, always make a partner because they can make you better at everything you do.